We begin this morning in Georgia, where the man on trial for shooting and killing Ahmaud Arbery made a surprise appearance on the witness stand yesterday, testifying in his own defense.
Travis Mcmichael was the first defense witness to take the stand, along with his father and neighbor. He's accused of confronting Arbery and killing him as he jogged down the street. Travis Mcmichael said he wanted to give his side of the story, saying he acted in self-defense.
What did you do?
I shot.
Why?
He had my gun. He struck me. It was obvious that he was. It was obvious that he was attacking me. That if he would have got the shotgun from me, then it was this is a life or death situation, and I'm going to have to stop him from doing this. So I shot.
Did he stop when you shot?
He did not.
Speaking after the testimony, Arbery's mother said she welcomed hearing Mcmichael's account, but accused him of acting on assumptions rather than certainties.
I want to say I appreciate his testimony because it gave my family and I some insight on what he was actually thinking. Mr. Travis Mcmichael killed my son all on assumptions. He had no real facts or where Ahmaud was coming from, what Ahmaud had done. He just took actions into his own hands.
Let's break it down with NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos, who joins us with more. So this was a surprise move, seeing Travis Mcmichael take the stand. So first of all, help us understand, how common is it to see someone like this testify in their own defense? And how did his version of events stack up against previous testimony?
Remember these days, because between Rittenhouse and the Mcmichael case, we now have two defendants testifying in courtrooms that allow television cameras. Very rare, may not happen again in our lifetime. That's how rare it is to put your client as a defense attorney on the stand. And the reason is defense attorneys are risk averse. And given that the prosecution has the burden to prove each and every element and the defense has to prove nothing, generally the risk averse approach is don't put your client on the stand. There may be now a narrow exception to that in the case of self-defense. In both the Rittenhouse case and this case, the Mcmichael case, you don't have a situation like a white-collar case, like a Theranos case, where there's months and years of emails and maybe damaging things your client said. Instead, your client just has to be coherent about a minute of their life and express to the jury that they were in fear, mortal fear, of their own life. So self-defense may be one of those narrow categories where the risk lowers enough to actually put your client on the stand. But still, keep in mind, this is very rare.
It's unusual, and we're seeing it almost in parallel with the timing of these two trials at the same time. So we also heard Mcmichael describe an alleged encounter that he had a couple of weeks before with a prowler. I want everyone to listen to that.
He's, lack of better terms, lurking. It was creeping. Wasn't in a run. It was just creeping through the shadows. You know, if there's a shadow running through here, he'd run with it and then go to it, and he was staying close to the house. As he comes out of the shadows from behind that portalet, he comes directly to me. I'm out of the door, and he comes out and he pulls up his shirt and goes to reach in his pocket or waistband area. It freaked me out. So once I realized what's going on, that he is doing this, and I'm under assumption that he's armed.
The pulling up the shirt, reaching it. How does this story potentially help the defense or affect their strategy?
The defendant has to express or convince the jury that he had a reasonable fear for his safety. So these prior incidents are for teeing up the argument that, hey, don't just look at the video itself. Look at what happened in the days prior. He was in fear for his safety, and he had a reason to be fearful for his safety, because that's the key. His actions have to be reasonable in self-defense. And it's possible that the jury, just looking at that video, may conclude that, I don't know, that looks like a guy who drove out in a car with a rifle and actually went to the trouble. So in order to combat that, they are putting this defendant on the stand and saying, no, you have to look at everything in context. In the weeks prior, I had reason to fear for my safety.
Quickly on this last point, one reason defendants often don't take the stand is because they do have to be cross-examined. That's going to happen. What should we expect today?
The prosecution is really going to hammer whether or not they really had a reasonable fear of safety if the only knowledge they really had was that this might be somebody who was trespassing. And they're going to it's going to be very dramatic as they point out that, hey, you got your guns and you went after somebody that you could tell was probably not armed and who was trying to run away from you. They're going to hammer those points home to try and make it look like what they did was unreasonable, because if they do that, then the defendants cannot use self-defense.
Wow, that'll be interesting to watch.
Yep. Danny Savalas. Danny, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always, Danny. Now to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where the jury will begin a third day of deliberations in the Kyle Rittenhouse homicide trial. Yesterday, the defense again asked the judge to declare a mistrial, arguing they were provided a lower resolution version of a key piece of video evidence. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber has been following the case closely from Kenosha. Good morning, Ellison. Can you talk to us more about this video footage? What does it show and what's being disputed here?
Yeah, so we can watch it together here. What this drone video shows is it is the moments before and the moment when Kyle Rittenhouse shot the first person that night and killed Joseph Rosenbaum. Prosecutors say this video clearly shows Rittenhouse pointing his gun at Rosenbaum before Rosenbaum chased him. We'll keep playing it here just so that you can keep watching it and just see all of this for yourself, because this has really become central to the prosecution's case. The prosecution argues that this moment here, that it shows provocation and that Rittenhouse lost the right to self-defense because they say he first pointed his rifle prior even to when they interacted at the cars here. They say it's this moment right when he comes past the pole here that there is a moment where Kyle Rittenhouse turns and points his gun at Rosenbaum, and that's when Rosenbaum gives chase. The issue for the defense, they say they had a compressed version of this video. This video was entered into the trial itself rather late, and they want a mistrial because all of that. Here's some of the argument that we heard from them in court yesterday. Listen.
We didn't have the quality of evidence that the state had until the case had been closed. I'm going to be asking the court for a mistrial based upon the fact that if we're really trying to get to the heart of it, we've watched the video. I can tell you what we think, but it doesn't matter what we think because we don't get to present that to the jury anymore.
Again, I'm going to say that it has to be addressed if there's a guilty verdict on any degree.
The defendant's first attorney, after he was charged with this case, appeared on an interview, appeared alongside the high-definition version of this footage. I understand he's gone through other attorneys since then, but the defendant himself would have been aware of it. His legal team would have been aware of it.
So you heard the prosecution making that argument there. Their argument is they say, hey, this was a technical glitch. We did not mean to send a compressed version. But either way, they say while they did not have access to this video until recently, they have found an interview from Kyle Rittenhouse's very first legal team on a Fox News program where they actually had a high-quality version of this playing. So they say, hey, somewhere along the line, the defendant's team had this, so this is a technical glitch, and by no means does the prosecution believe that it should result in a mistrial, as the defense is requesting.
And quickly on that, Ellison, did the jury actually see the high-resolution version or the low-resolution version before I move to the next question?
So they saw the high-resolution version, and that's part of the argument from the prosecution is they say what was played in court was the right version. That's what the prosecution has. The defense just says, hey, that's not fair, though, because we didn't see it beforehand. Vicki.
Okay, let me ask you about this. The defense previously requested a mistrial with prejudice. This time they're asking for a mistrial without prejudice. Talk to us about that distinction, and has the judge given any indication whether he's considering granting either of those requests?
So mistrial with prejudice would mean that the state cannot retry this again. Mistrial without prejudice would mean that they can bring it back up again. The first time the defense asked for a mistrial, and they formally filed that motion on Monday, they asked for a mistrial with prejudice so that it could not be tried again. They gave 3 reasons for that. One of that, they argued, was the issue of this drone video. But the other 2 things they argued in that motion was they said that there were 2 incidents when the lead prosecutor was cross-examining Kyle Rittenhouse, one where he mentioned his post-arrest silence, and then another where he tried to ask him a question about video evidence that the judge had not allowed in court. They say that that was misconduct. Therefore, they wanted a mistrial with prejudice. It doesn't come back up again. Now, though, this newest request is solely focused on this drone video and the fact that they say they didn't have access to the high quality video. And in this case, they are asking now for a mistrial, but without prejudice, so that the state could bring it back up again. The judge said that he didn't feel like the decision needed to be made from the bench yesterday as he was evaluating it. But he said if the jury comes back with guilty on any count, that then they are going to have to deal with this. And he said it was going to be an issue. Vicki?
All right, that verdict expected any day now. Ellison, thanks so much.
More help could soon be on the way in the fight against COVID-19. Moderna submitted its COVID booster shot to the FDA for emergency use authorization for all adults. The company's application comes as we wait for news on the approval of Pfizer's booster shot. That could come as soon as today. Approval of these boosters would come at a critical point in the pandemic as some parts of the country are experiencing another rise in cases. NBC News correspondent Kristen Dahlgren is tracking one of the latest hotspots in New England. She joins us from the University of Vermont Medical Center in Burlington. So, Kristen, good morning. Walk us through, first of all, what we know about the status of the Moderna and Pfizer booster shot applications. Could the FDA sign off on them, or at least one of them, as early as today?
A lot of people are hopeful, Joe. Look, at this point, those booster shots are approved for those that are 65 and older, those living in long-term care facilities, and people with underlying conditions. The push now from those companies is to open it up to all Americans, regardless of age. And so we are waiting to see what the FDA is going to do. They are expected to move first on that Pfizer booster, and then Moderna just yesterday asked for emergency use authorization for all Americans for its vaccine as well. And so we are watching today to see whether or not the FDA is going to approve that use. It's interesting, though, here in Vermont and in many states now, the governors are legislating that those vaccines can go to anyone. And so here in Vermont, they've opened it up to people of any age to begin getting those booster shots. Joe.
Kristen, we know COVID cases are spiking in New England, especially where you are in Vermont, which has seen COVID cases rise by 60% in the last 2 weeks, even though they have the highest vaccination rate of any state in the country. So what are health officials saying is behind the surge, and are any of the hospitals there struggling with that?
Right, and Vermont was looked at as a beacon for so much of this pandemic, getting out front of the vaccine, having more than 90% vaccination rates for people 12 and older here in Vermont. 18% of children now have received their first dose of the vaccine. And so there are very high vaccination rates. A lot of people then asking why this surge, and it really is remarkable. Vermont has been seeing some of the highest totals it has seen for positive cases through the entire pandemic. And so really this surge right now, they say there's really no one thing that's contributing, but a number of factors. In part, it is now among the unvaccinated. So while there's 90%, there's still a large number of unvaccinated people. There's a push for mask mandates. The governor says he is not going to institute another mask mandate, but he has called a special session of the legislature in order for towns to be able to institute mask mandates if they wish. And so they're pushing people to have mask mandates again. And then because so many people were vaccinated early on, now some of that is waning, and so we are seeing some breakthrough cases and the push to get people the booster shots now as things cool down, as more people are inside this time of year. Joe.
All right, Kristen Dahlgren reporting from Vermont. Kristen, thank you so much.
For more on the surge in COVID cases in the New England area and the potential approval of booster shots for everyone 18 and over, we're going to bring in Dr. Anand Swaminathan. He's an assistant professor of emergency medicine at St. Joseph's Hospital. Good morning, doctor. As we just heard from Kristen, there has been a surge in cases in that New England area. Talk about why this is happening. She said it was a variety of factors, but is this primarily happening in the unvaccinated communities? How much of this, if any, is accounting for breakthrough cases? And if you're vaccinated, do you need to be worried?
Well, I do think it is many of these different factors coming into play. I think what we're seeing is as the weather cools, and I'm in New Jersey, it's pretty cold here, people are being forced indoors. Mm-hmm. Also with schools, where we know that a big part of the surge right now in the New England area is amongst school-age kids who have just become eligible. 18% have gotten their first shot. we're still having to ramp up that immunization for kids. And so they are at a higher risk. They're in school, they're indoors. Winter sports are starting, they're playing in gyms, so there's going to be more transmission there as well. And a lot of this is simply Delta. Delta variant we know is more infectious, and as we're forced more indoors, it's a lot easier to transmit it from person to person. What we need to be focusing then on is all of the things that have helped us public health-wise, so masking, ventilation, but then also getting our vaccination rates higher, expanding our ability to test on the spot, and do really good contact tracing to help to tamp down those breakouts.
So, Doctor, we're talking so much about booster shots, Pfizer and Moderna. So if one or both get approved by the FDA, do you think that has an impact on what we're seeing in New England and a possible winter surge? Or is it really the key is to get those people who still haven't had any vaccines at all, get them that shot?
I think that boosters are going to have a pretty marginal impact overall. What we have to remember is that the primary series of vaccines are still extremely protective against hospitalization and against death. And what we are going to see as this outbreak carries on in the Northeast is while cases might go up, our hospitalizations and deaths going to follow in places where the vaccine rates are very high. But the information we have tells us that that's unlikely to happen, that hospitalizations and deaths should still stay on the lower side. And so I'm not sure how much boosters are going to help. Yes, they are important for those that are older, those that are immunocompromised, but we do see data out of the Kaiser Family Foundation telling us that that's not just the group that's getting them. There's also a lot of people with higher socioeconomic status that are a less risk for contracting COVID that are the ones that are getting boosters. So it's going to really have a marginal impact. And it's distracting us from what needs to be pushed, which is getting first doses into those that aren't immunized already, especially kids.
Okay, doctor, let me ask you this. Practically speaking, should people mix and match when they're choosing a booster? It seems like a lot of the data suggests that increases the effectiveness.
We want more data on mix and match, really, to be able to guide this. But there is some information telling us that the Moderna booster gives a little bit more of a robust response. So if you had J&J in the past, getting a Pfizer or Moderna makes a lot of sense. Change the type of platform of vaccine that you're getting. If you had Pfizer before getting a Moderna, honestly, I would say that if you're eligible for a booster, if you're in one of those high-risk groups, get whatever booster you can get as soon as you can get it. I think that is the best thing to do. And even though we have lots of vaccines around, we're still seeing places where people are having tough access. They're having a hard time making appointments. I tried to book my booster. I don't have an appointment for a week to get a booster. So I think we have to take that into account and say, get what you can get if you're eligible for a booster.
Great advice. We really appreciate the insight. Dr. Swaminathan, thanks so much.
Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon is due back in court today after pleading not guilty to charges of contempt of Congress. Bannon was indicted by a federal grand jury for refusing to comply with a subpoena from the House committee investigating the January 6 riots. His attorneys say he was complying with former President Trump's wishes as he planned to invoke executive privilege. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins us now with more details. So, Leanne, the central question here seems to be just how far does executive privilege go? So what do we know about today's court appearance, and how closely do you think the House Select Committee is watching how this case plays out?
Good morning, Joe. So that's right. Executive privilege is, in fact, the question here. As you mentioned, Steve Bannon says that he has it because he used to work for the former president. We know that he did not work for the former president during January 6th. The last time he worked for him was 2017. So, legal observers say that it's a stretch to claim executive privilege, even though that's what Bannon is doing. As far as the committee is concerned, they're watching this case extremely closely. Adam Schiff, a member of the committee, said that they are preparing to serve Mark Meadows perhaps the same punishment, a referral of criminal contempt to the Department of Justice. But the difference between Meadows' case is Meadows did work for the former president on January 6th. He was his chief of staff, one of his top advisors. So that claim of executive privilege could be treated differently there. But the committee is watching the Bannon case very closely to see how the Justice Department deals with it and what sort of answers they might see on if they move forward with other people who defy subpoenas. Joe.
Leanne, let's talk about another big January 6th headline. The Arizona man known as the QAnon shaman was sentenced yesterday, 41 months in prison for storming the U.S. Capitol. What more can you tell us about that?
He was. He calls himself the QAnon shaman. He, of course, is not a shaman. But it was almost the maximum sentence. 51 months was the maximum sentence. He was given 41 months of jail time for his actions. You see him on the screen there. He's one of the most identifiable rioters from January 6th. He is the person who was on the Senate floor with a flagpole made into a spear. And the judge handed down a very tough sentence, saying that what he did was, in fact, terrible. He tried to claim remorse. The judge didn't buy it, and so now he will spend the next more than 3 years in prison. Joe.
Leanne, of course, we also have to ask you about what happened with censuring Representative Paul Gosar, who was, of course, posted a video depicting killing Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, attacking President Biden. What happened with that vote yesterday?
Yeah, the vote passed. It was mostly a party line vote. 2 Republicans joined all Democrats. Representative Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger were the 2 Republicans who supported this censure resolution. It's the first censure to pass the House floor since 2010. But before the vote, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the target of Paul Gosar's video, spoke, and so did Paul Gosar. Let's listen to what they said.
I voluntarily took the cartoon down, not because it was itself a threat, but because some thought it was.
What is so hard about saying that this is wrong?
And that was a question that Republicans did not answer. They stood on the side of Representative Gosar, and Leader McCarthy gave a speech on the floor saying potentially there could be retribution if the Republicans take control of the House next year. Joe.
All right, a lot to cover this morning. Leanne, thank you as always.
Later today, President Biden will host Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau and Mexican President López Obrador at the White House. It'll be the first North American Leaders Summit, or more commonly referred to as the Three Amigos Summit, since 2016. The White House says the three will, quote, reaffirm their strong ties to address issues like COVID-19, migration, and climate change. NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece joins us now with more. Good morning, Shannon. A lot on the agenda for this summit. As we mentioned, it's the first time these leaders are meeting at the White House since 2016. Tell us more about what the summit is going to look like, what President Biden is hoping to accomplish.
Well, more broadly, as you mentioned, this is the first time the three leaders have come together in quite a while. Of course, under the Trump administration, there were some rather contentious negotiations over renegotiating NAFTA between the three countries. Now the administration says a lot of their focus over the past 10 months has just been trying to rebuild these relationships, not only at the leader-to-leader level, but at the institutional level, so that they feel like there's a good flow of communication to work through disagreements that the countries might have. There are a few specific things, though, we expect the administration to announce today. One is going to be that some vaccine doses that the U.S. donated to Mexico and Canada at the start of the pandemic, or actually I should say loaned to Mexico and Canada at the start of the pandemic, those are going to now be shared with other countries. Mexico and Canada are essentially going to pay that forward and give them to some other countries in the region. And also a commitment to reduce methane and coal and black carbon emissions from oil and natural gas by 75% as much. Another big announcement we expect to hear from them today.
Shannon, according to senior administration officials, President Biden will have separate meetings as well with each leader. So let's start off with Canada. Prime Minister Trudeau, critical of former President Trump's trade policies. What are some of the issues you think the Prime Minister of Canada is expected to bring up?
Well, trade obviously remains a very important issue. Another thing, supply chain issues. The senior administration officials told reporters yesterday they're planning to put together a working group that could identify materials that are vulnerable to shortages, things like critical minerals, and to work to try and have a system in place to head off those type of shortages. The administration also said they're talking about creating a tribal Indigenous peoples working group to address things like violence against Indigenous women and girls. So just a number of issues that we've been previewed that we expect to come up today.
And turning to Mexico, immigration always a major topic. In fact, border apprehensions hit an all-time high this year, according to Customs and Border Protection data. How is President Biden going to address illegal immigration with Mexican President López Obrador?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of tensions there. The administration said one issue they're not going to bring up is this controversial remain in Mexico policy. The U.S. is under a court order right now where asylum seekers have to remain in Mexico until they can have an asylum hearing. The administration says that's something that's before the courts. They're not going to bring that up. But more broadly, they're hoping that this is an opportunity, they said, for the three countries to lock arms and come up with some common solutions to immigration problems and addressing the root causes, like labor shortages and how to match industries with short supply of labor to people who are looking for work, issues like that, and also human trafficking, how to really be able to identify and crack down on some of these human trafficking issues we've been seeing.
All right. Thank you, Shannon, so much.
Tonight, skywatchers will be treated to a near total lunar eclipse. The duration of the eclipse will be 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 24 seconds, because every second counts, making it the longest partial eclipse in, get this, 580 years.
Wow, we are pretty pumped about this. NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns joins us now with a look at the forecast for tonight. Hopefully, Bill, it's going to be clear enough. Can we see it?
Well, yeah, that's the key. But we're excited about it because on our early hours, it's perfect for us because we'll wake up in the middle of the night. We can go look at the moon eclipse. Everyone else is going to have to either, set the alarm or record it somehow or watch it tomorrow morning when we show you a time lapse. So let's show you the weather concerns for it because obviously you need the clear skies. So we have the storm system that's tracking through the Ohio Valley tonight. That's going to be on the East Coast, on the eastern seaboard. So unfortunately, that may eliminate a lot of people in a hurry. So today's that day I recommended you get outside, you take advantage of this afternoon before that early sunset. Temperatures in the 70s as far north as almost New York City and Boston. I mean, that's almost unheard of this time of year. So this could easily be the warmest afternoon you're going to get until maybe March or April. That cold air in the middle of the country is going to be moving in. So about that lunar eclipse, well, as far as the forecast goes, here is the cloud forecast for the middle of the night. On the East Coast, the clouds will be clearing out, but it may not be in time. Boston and New York. I think D.C. should be fine all the way to St. Louis. Down in Florida, no chance for you. And it looks like in the West, a lot of cloud cover. And as far as the timing of it goes, it begins at 2:20 a.m., and then it looks like it'll be about its greatest totality at about 4:03 a.m. and about 99%. By the time it ends is at 5:47. So as I said, this is a good eclipse for those that have trouble sleeping or maybe night shifts or early wake-up times like us.
All right. That peak time is during our morning call, so maybe we'll stop with the whole team in the morning. Everyone can look out their window.
That's a great idea.
Lovely. All right. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.